We also have another report that's just out by the American Enterprise Institute. Derek Scissors questioning the accuracy of the numbers being put out by China in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Derek joins us right now this morning on the phone. He's a resident scholar at AEI and chief economist at the China Beige Book, and he's been listening to this conversation with Eunice in Beijing. And we just had a little bit of a discussion there, Derek, about the veracity of the numbers. What's your take on the veracity of the numbers? You think they are off by what kind of magnitude?
Well, I did appreciate Eunice saying that we're going to start counting asymptomatic cases on April Fool's Day, more than 2 months after they apply to quarantine. I mean, that's a good sign of what the Chinese have been doing to now. There's been no mass testing, which means the numbers should not be compared to the United States, where we are now doing late mass testing. And you'd add to that the fact that we know the party isn't honest about anything that's politically sensitive, from non-performing loan levels to Xi Jinping looking like Winnie the Pooh. I would say two angles on how big the mistakes are. Cases in Hubei are nearly 5 times higher than outside of Hubei province, which is where Wuhan is, even though the population of China outside Hubei is 22 times larger. So magically, although hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people left Hubei, although there was no quarantine for at least a month, China doesn't have a COVID problem except in one province. South Korea is held up as a magnificent example of how to deal with COVID. China outside of Hubei wildly outperforms South Korea. If you divided the South Korean testing program's positive rate by 10, you'd get 3.4 million cases in China. Not 300,000, 3.4 million. So if the Chinese were doing much better than South Korea, you'd still have millions of cases, and they report outside of Hubei 15,000.
Derek, on a relative basis, how would you assess how we're doing, the U.S.?
Well, I mean, we're finally getting numbers. All of the world, I object to these graphics that are put up comparing countries. India doesn't count. Japan doesn't count. We're counting now finally. South Korea is counting finally. You can't make public policy decisions unless you know where the cases are. You could imagine if we didn't have mass counting in New York, how would we deal with it? How would Cuomo and other governors make decisions? So I think we're finally doing the right thing. We started very, very late.
And how off do you think our numbers are right now? I mean, there are some people who would say our numbers are still off because of testing and the lack of testing, that we're off by a magnitude of 5 to 10.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the incidence rate in South Korea, which has the most extensive testing per capita, because they've tested so widely, the percentage who are reporting positive at any time has dropped below 3%. We're at 17% as of yesterday. So that suggests to me that we're still missing about a spread of 5 in the population. Now, of course, I don't want to alarm people. Most people with COVID don't get very sick. 90-some% of the cases are mild. But I think if you look at their testing program and ours, we're probably off by a factor of 5.
Let me ask you the terrible question. Is your view that if we had more accurate numbers, we would be doing less? Because that's what I think you're implying.
No, my view, if we had more accurate numbers, we would be doing the right thing. In other words, right now there are hotspots in the U.S. that I don't think we are aware of are hotspots. We see a little bit of a problem, but we don't have enough tests to know that there's a problem. And so we're not taking strong enough action in those local areas. Meanwhile, there are other areas where maybe if you had a broad testing program, you'd find, 2% of the people have this. I'm not that worried about it. So I definitely don't think there's a general rule of do less. I think there's a rule that the U.S. is a huge country. We've already seen this in Washington and New York. There's a ton of variation. We don't know where that variation really is.